All righty, we are broadcasting and recording. Few people joining in here. I'll wait here about a minute or two, make sure we got anyone else who's going to join. Welcome. So feel free if you want to say hi in the chat, that's up to you, or ask questions throughout. Feel free to add your information in there. Hope everyone is having an amazing Thursday. Trending on social is Galentine's Day. I had to look it up what that means, but I guess it's like Friends Valentine's Day. Love Galentine's Day. That's awesome. It is a good time. I'll give it one more minute and we'll get started here. So thanks everyone for coming in and appreciate your patience on everything. Excuse me. Almost there. Welcome, welcome. We got about 30 more seconds. We'll get started here. So thanks for your patience, guys. We'll give everyone a chance to get on and get going. Hey, Mark Otter, how we doing? +1 Galentine's Day. I love it. Awesome. Hello to Kim. We have Liz and Jane and Katie. Welcome, welcome. And let's go in. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So my name is Matt. I'm the co-founder of #ICanHelp, and we do social media education, online safety training. I'll talk a little bit about our background and how we got started. Essentially, we got started when students made a fake Facebook page about a teacher, a lot of drama, a lot of followers, over 1,000 followers. Eventually, a student found out who made it, turned the person in, page got taken down. A year later, someone made a fake Instagram page about the same teacher. This time that page had 0 followers. We had over 30 students go online, comment in support of the teacher. The page was down in less than 45 minutes. And since that initial incident was back in 2011, we've gotten over 1,000 pages taken down off social media, dealing with cyberbullying, harassment, you name it. And that was kind of good in the beginning, right? Training kids on how to respond to negative content, things like that. Sort of where evolution came is really modeling and guiding for students how to create positive content. And so I'm going to share some stuff today, depending on your lens. If you're an administrator, if you're a teacher, want to share some examples of what's been working, some best practices, go over some laws, and then definitely would love to talk about the community and sort of how we want to support people through online learning and best practices and things like that. So go ahead and I'm going to share my screen really quick on that. And let's give this a shot. There we go. And hopefully you guys can still see that. Are we good? So here we go. This is kind of our social media stuff. If you want to check that out, ICanHelp on Twitter, ICanHelp Official on YouTube and Instagram. Here's kind of some of our stash, just to give you an idea. So we've had 6 school threats reported right away to admin or teachers, trusted adult. We've had 4 suicide threats reported to adult that were prevented. We've had over 1,000 negative sites taken down, and hundreds of thousands more in terms of creating positive content. And this is a big aha for us. We started checking these numbers about a year ago, is realizing, thinking of students as digital first responders, right? And that's what we'll talk a lot about today, is how do we train students not only to respond, but to tell the appropriate person. And that's a big part of our work, is A, responding to that content, that's the first responder piece, and then B, how do we train them to create positive content? Because both of those will have an ultimate impact on what is being posted and shared on social media. So right here, these are some of the main social media sites. You have Instagram, House Party, that's the hand one that you see next to Instagram there. So think about if you grew up in the 80s or 90s, the old party lines they used to call into, group chat lines. It's the same thing, but it's all video. YouTube, kids YouTube, you name it. Photo app, a lot of kids like taking pictures, but there's a lot of privacy issues there. WhatsApp, which you'll see, especially if you have international students who travel a lot. It's very popular because it's just safe one-to-one communication. TikTok, which is the fastest growing social media app in the youth demographic right now. Messenger, group texting is huge. Twitter tends to be more high school and college, but you see a few kids on there. Down on the left side of the screen, excuse me, under WhatsApp is Periscope, which is a video app for Twitter. Fortnite, generally Fortnite is still up there. Overwatch, a lot of gaming apps. Snapchat, the biggest thing in Snapchat to be aware of right now is an app called YOLO, which is sort of an anonymous add-on where kids can ask questions and be anonymous on that. And then Twitch is on the bottom corner, which is a video game streaming app. Very popular if you just want to watch other people play games, stream videos, things like that. So in terms of social media, it's all over the map. If you want to know popularity, TikTok is the fastest growing. Instagram and Facebook are still two of the top. WhatsApp is in that top 5 as well. Twitter, you have over 1 billion tweets shared over every 2 days. Gaming, obviously very popular. A lot of kids like, oh, I'm not a gamer, but then you'll see them doing something on their phone and sure enough, they're playing solitaire, Mario Kart, something. It's like, no, you're a gamer. So everything is sort of shifting the landscape where and how they communicate what's going on and what's happening. So kind of want to start off, we'll hit the heavy stuff first. If you've been in teaching admin for a while, you've seen some of the stuff pop up, and we'll kind of go from there in terms of how we've worked with kids to respond to that and do something about that and just sort of how we raise our own awareness. So first example, this is from one of the schools we work with. This was on Snapchat. Sure enough, a student was coming to school, happened to see it. They then went to their teacher administrator, and that teacher administrator followed up on it, investigated. It turns out that the student did have a weapon. They were at school and were going to do something. What's amazing about this one is the student knew exactly what was going on. They knew who to tell. They knew who to go to. There was a clear communication, and the school followed through. That's the biggest thing. A lot of young people tell us they don't tell an adult. They won't tell an adult. And the reason they won't do that is because there's no follow through, right? And we hear a lot from, and I hear this quite a bit, and we'll touch on this later, from admin. It's like, oh, well, it's off campus speech. It happens somewhere else, until something happens on campus, we don't have to do anything about that. And with the current generation, so much of their life, there's no more offline and online, there's just life for them. And so much of what happens online impacts school and vice versa. So I think the more we can have systems in place for kids to share this, and I know it's tough, but admin and teachers being able to take action on it appropriately and follow through in the investigations, and kids just being aware of like, right, if this happens, who do I tell? Because we've seen these come up again and again. I could tell you when I was a teacher myself, having anonymous bomb threats. Right. So getting the notification, someone saw something in the bathroom, we got posted to an anonymous account. Next thing you know, we're spending the entire day on the football field because police and everyone else has to clear the entire school to figure out where that threat's taking place. It's things like that of just trying to avoid those situations of how do we be proactive and supportive in making this stuff happen. Here's another one, which I think highlights some bigger, more common issues and just more cyberbullying, right? So this is Bailey. Bailey, like any student, was super excited, had a new outfit on, was going to take a picture and wanted to share it, which is what she did. And she comes to school, and as she comes to school that day, students start following her around. They start taking pictures. You see the photo there in the middle. Bailey's a little bit heavy. And they start taking pictures of her and circling body parts and making comments and talking about her outfit and making negative comments about her. They share those photos on social. They text their friends. No one says anything to Bailey. She has to find this out on her own. And so she finds out on her own that kids are walking around her, that they're taking photos, they're trying to highlight, parts of her and make fun of her for that respect. No one steps up, no one says anything, no one does anything. So Bailey does the only thing that she's able to do, and that's she texts her mom and says, hey, can you help me out? And mom, like anyone, is like, well, I work. Why would I do that? She's like, well, kids are making fun of me. Mom says, okay, what do you need? And she tells her, I'll be there in 7 minutes. 7 minutes later, mom shows up, goes into the office. She hands the clothes, gives everyone everything they need, says nothing. Office calls Bailey. Bailey comes in, picks up her clothes, leaves the office, says nothing. In fact, it's almost 2 weeks before the school even finds out what happened. This is where it gets tough because we've seen time and time again where something like this, a cyberbullying incident, harassment issue that happens on campus and no one tells the office. Parents don't talk to them, students don't talk to them. And it just creates a lot of issues because what we've seen is if something does get worse or if instances escalate, it almost always ends up coming back to the school. It's like, well, what is your system and procedure for reporting this content? How have you trained students? And this is where stuff starts to become reactive. And we want to get ahead of this because it's, as we talk to students when we share this, it's no one should be worried about having to walk around, have someone circle a body part and to call them out on it and make fun of them for that. And that's a big thing is, how do you encourage students to be creative and express themselves appropriately without that fear of being judged or ridiculed? And I think that's a big part of social media is kids are trying to find their way. They're trying to find their place. They're trying to find their voice. If you remember, if you've been in teaching for a while, there's a Boys and Girls Club study from the late 60s that talks about, most kids succeed when they have a caring adult in their life who's not a parent. And this could be a teacher, a big brother, big sister, a relative, a coach, someone from the church or community who has a big influence on them. And what we're seeing is those relationships are becoming harder to form. And so kids are going online to try and find that. And when they don't have that caring adult behind them for when they make a mistake, and kids are going to make a mistake, it's just part of being human and growing up. It's harder for them to recover from that. It's harder for them to make those good decisions. It's harder for them to really make an impact in what they're trying to do. And that's what brings us to this. There's been a lot of commentary discussion on Techlash recently and going against the companies, pointing fingers, like you got to make this better. And the companies certainly recognize that. The flip side of that is, especially talking about mental health, is there's so much misinformation. And this is a frustration. It's really hard to improve how our relationship goes with technology when we don't have the right data. And so a couple of things, and looking at this, you've probably seen some of these headlines, but giving your child a cell phone is like giving them cocaine, right? Tech addiction. Increase in screen time equals increase in depression and suicide. We've seen some people trying to make correlational studies of how anxiety and depression is increasing as phones have been out. 50% of young people are addicted to their devices. Smartphones have destroyed a generation. And all of these statements have been proven to be not true. Talking to researchers like A.B. Orban and Andrew Chabilsky out of Oxford, Jeff Hancock out of Stanford, they've done a lot of work going through all the research, looking at the criteria, looking at the data, trying to find out what's real, because it's hard to come up with an appropriate solution. And in one of the studies specifically, they talked about technology and how students and their relationship affecting their mental health. And they changed their criteria and basically found out that if they substituted certain categories, like one of them, they said, oh, well, let's say potatoes. If they took out tech and put in potatoes, they found out potatoes are just as bad for your health as technology. And so how we evaluate the data, how we look at the technology, look at the different studies coming out, making sure that it's not being cherry picked. I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, a study came out also from A.B. Orban and Andrew Chabilsky looking at sleep and screen time. And through a very rigorous data set, they discovered that basically about a half-hour screen time before bed only impacts about 1 minute of sleep. And so this ongoing conversation about screens and 2 hours before bed and blue light, certainly more research needs to be done, but to say that's the reason kids aren't sleeping is not entirely true. So again, how do we shift the narrative and change our habits and look at what we can do? And this is a big one. I love this next statement. And this is what's been so big about our evolution is I can help, rather than focusing on, hey, if you post bad stuff online, these colleges are going to kick you out. If you post bad stuff online, no one's going to hire you, you're going to lose your job. But really is, how do we empower kids to have more control over their devices, right? How do we support them in creating more positive content? Because the kids who feel like they're in control of their social media, that they're in control of their device, they have less stress, they have less anxiety, right? They know how to use social media. They know how to be positive with social media, and they can make an impact on that. And that's pretty amazing. And that's what we've seen with schools, rather than going in and telling kids, hey, here's what not to do, right? This is, beginning teacher 101. Instead of telling kids what not to do in your class, show them what they can do. And we've seen some pretty positive and amazing stuff come out of that. One of the ways you can do that, so this lesson, not unique to us, but we have a whole slew of lessons around this, and we'll share a lot of them after this presentation, but just online identity, right? A few ways to do it is you can have kids Google themselves. You can have kids, in this case, exchange phones, or have your staff exchange phones and look at each other's social media and see what they can learn about each other on those devices. I had an incident a few years ago where two students, and you always have this, right? We all have that one friend that we share dumb stories with that no one else gets. It's like, you're dumb. No, you're dumb. What do you want to do? And what's amazing to me is, I have a best friend that we tell jokes to each other that I would never share in public, because if anyone else heard these jokes, they just stare at you and be like, seriously, you need help. And these two girls are making fun of each other. They're in math class, they're juniors in high school, and the teacher's just like, leave me alone, your work's done, don't bother me. And they just start roasting each other, right? And they're making fun of each other, telling these jokes. Well, they thought it was so funny, they went to Twitter and they started sharing these jokes on Twitter. And it became so involved over about 3 days. I had students coming up to me saying, hey, Mr. Soa, this thing's going on. Can you talk to him? It's just really weird. And so I pulled the girls aside, and one of them was walking in class one day, and I asked her what's going on. And as soon as I said Twitter, I could see her put her head down. And I said, so what, tell me what happened. So she shared the story that I just shared. I said, well, let me show you something. So I went to my computer, went into Google, typed in her name, and the sixth link down was her Twitter profile. And on that Twitter profile was everything she was saying about her friend. Now, at this point, as a junior, she just interviewed for her first job. And so I asked her how it went. I said, well, your boss called and gave you a great recommendation. Sounds like your interview went well. They said, just on a hunch, what if I decided to go and look this up? Which one is the real you? So I click back and I see someone with the same name, link number 7. So I click on link number 7, and here's this person who had raised $10,000 for their sister with this really rare disease. I said, this is amazing. Like, I wonder who this is. And she cuts me off and says, Mr. Soeth, that's me too. And so I asked her, I said, let me get this right. You raised $10,000 for your sister with this rare disease in a 3-month period. Yet my first impression of you is what I'm seeing here online. Which one is the real you? And so getting kids to think in that context, like very simple, tangible activities, getting them to discuss it, getting them to practice it, and showing them like right in front of them with stuff that they have of the impact they're making, how they're making it, and that perception. We need to keep reinforcing that idea, right? We need to keep them revisiting that idea, and they definitely have a chance to practice, because to tell a kid, hey, if you post bad stuff online, here's what's going to happen, they're not going to get it. They've never gotten it, and they never will get it. And so I think the more we can do to make that happen, even better. And that's what I want to try and make happen. See a couple questions on here. So we'll try and get to those here in a second. There we go. So kind of moving on a little bit. So all of our lessons have discussion questions. There are challenges connected to that. And so we love making some of that kind of stuff happen. Things to be aware of. So this is specific to California, but wherever you are, almost every state in the US has an Electronic Privacy Act. So if you just Google your state name, Electronic Privacy Act, and it really has to do with what information you can collect, how you can collect it. There's COPPA, there's SIPA, there's all these new privacy laws coming out about what information you can share. And it's just good to be aware. Schools, this is hard, because if you get an incident reported to you, specifically anything related to discipline, student related, you really can't share about it, which makes it hard from a PR standpoint. So we're going to come back to that idea a little bit later, but thinking about what information you can share, how you can access that, right? Like even just, Googling a kid's social media account or looking it up on your own, potentially there could be some considerations there. This one is interesting. The second one, if you haven't seen it, so Scott K., 1979, Ninth Circuit, California Supreme Court, had to do with consent. And in this specific case, Scott was a student. Police knew he was selling marijuana on campus. They came to the parents' house and said, hey, we know your kid is selling marijuana at school and we want to search his room. And the parents said, sure, okay, search his room. And they went in the house, they opened his door, and in there was a giant toolbox full of marijuana. And the police seized it and they arrested him. By the time the case went to court, it ended up getting ruled as an illegal search and seizure. And basically what the court said is the parents, even though they paid for the house, paid for the room, because the parents never made it a regular habit to go into his room and search it for whatever, that was his private space, and the police should have gotten a warrant. So where this could apply, we've been talking to state SROs and a few other people, where this could apply is if you ask the kid to search his phone and he says no, and then the parents show up and the parents are like, well, we pay for it. Do you want to search his phone? Here it is. Several cases have applied this law to that. Ownership has to do with who's in physical possession, not necessarily who's paying for it. And unless the parents make it a regular habit of searching the phone. So always important, especially if you have a tough case, either working with your SRO, seeing if the kid has a PO, parole officer, but getting a warrant before you search the phone, or waiting to ask the parent and kid together. There's a lot of different ways to get access, but you want to be mindful of that, because if this case ever escalates or legal counsels get involved, that's where it's going to start to get dicey, and the law gets very specific over what you get access to and how you get access to it. Tinker versus Des Moines is another good one, but just being mindful of this one, it's really getting over applied, right? It's trying to separate off-campus speech, saying it's an on-campus incident. We've seen this, a very infamous case out of Michigan a few years ago, had to do with a student who posted something online. Someone made some comments about a female teacher on campus, a young female teacher. The kid went online and basically said like, oh yeah, I totally made out with her, which wasn't true. The school brought him in and initially said, hey, if you tell us you're guilty, we're just going to suspend you. Then the district decided to proceed with an expulsion. The sheriff's department said stuff, the school said stuff that they shouldn't have. Long story short, the court ended up ruling in favor of the student, saying basically if he wants to get up and yell stuff, fake or not true or real, then he can do that, and had to pay a very large settlement to the student. So again, looking at how you apply the disruption and what's going on, we haven't seen a lot of cases around free speech in school yet. They're still sort of emerging. but just being mindful about how you apply Tinker versus Des Moines, causing a disruption, things like that. San Jose public versus private could have a real effect. I've talked to a few HR directors in the state of California who are looking at this, and this had to do with a former mayor in San Jose who was using his personal email and phone number to coordinate business deals with the city. And he was doing that because the Freedom of Information Act says that anyone can have access to that if they request it through a written order for court or whatever else. Where this could apply is thinking about how many teachers on your staff, admin, coaches, you name it, who may have access to student phone numbers, maybe communicating with other educators, with parents, with students, right? Because we have after school events, if you're going on a field trip, if you're, whatever it could be, you just need to be able to have that communication route. I was an activity director, I had 40 students, you know, and we had phone trees set up. And that was just how we communicate a lot of parents, because we just did so many events on campus that it needed to be that way. And at some point, you know, as an example, if you have a teacher who happens to have friends on campus and their daughter's also a student there, and then all of a sudden they get a text, hey, school's on lockdown, what happened? And then that teacher starts texting that parent what's going on. All that stuff eventually becomes potentially evidence or things that can be requested or information because it's pertaining to work. And what the San Jose case happened, the judge ruled is like, it doesn't matter if you did it on your phone or not. If it pertains to you doing your job, then we're allowed to get that information. So you need to give it to us. Yeah, and keeping in mind, like we're not a legal agency. You know, I worked as an administrator and teacher myself, and you know, these are things that we deal with these cases a lot, and we've talked to legal entities who've referenced this. We'll send out links to this information for you to check out as well, and just communicate on that. If you really want to know more, really big fans of cyberbullying.org, Samir Hinduja, Justin Patchen. So they have a link on their website, and it's also in one of our courses that outlines pretty much every cyberbullying law in the United States. There's 47 states have them on the books, I think, when I last checked. But whatever cyberbullying law in your state, if you click on their interactive map, you can see what laws are in effect in that state. They also have laws on sexting. So these are still popping up, but across states in the US, there are different laws related to sexting. And so you can click on your state and see what laws are relevant and where they fit in there and kind of what they can do on that. So we're doing pretty good here. A few more things I want to share. One of the things is a social media emergency plan. So we came to this idea about a year ago, and it had to do with the school and an incident on Snapchat. And the Snapchat incident, it was interesting in the sense that someone basically used Snap Maps. So in Snapchat, if you put your finger halfway on the screen and swipe down, you can see Snap Maps. And the intention was that if I'm in Snapchat and I can either A, see who my friends are around me because I've shared my location with them, or B, I can then share, or I get to share with anybody and I can find who's around me and go hang out with them. And in this case, someone was using Snap Maps. They forged their location, you know, through their computer and were able to target a specific high school, in this case, Northern California, and started going around and basically baiting people, trying to solicit nude images of minors. And they were successful. They got a lot of images, old videos, in some cases from kids when they were in 8th grade and freshmen in high school. They're now seniors, and started using those to harass and solicit more, right? So we call this, in the case of sexting, like, this is aggravated. Send me more pictures or I'm going to release this. Send me more pictures or I'm going to tell your friends or your family. And collected a whole slew of them. Well, enough kids figured it out. At this point, they were upset. They started reporting the account. They told admin, police got involved. It got taken down. The account came back under a new name, same person. They changed the name just a little bit, and this time started harassing students directly and physically threatened the school. I'm going to come blow up, shoot up your school. Reported, taken down again. This time they came back a third time. Long story short, we got involved at this point helping to report. You know, we do have a connection with Snapchat. We're able to assist, you know, to a degree in contacting Snapchat and putting it on their radar. We got a phone call from a police detective saying, hey, we're outside of Snapchat. Can you call them and tell them we're here? And my response was no. Like, if you don't have a meeting, they're not going to let you in the door. And this is true of all the tech companies, not specific to Snapchat. And where I pose it back to, like, if I showed up at your school and said, hey, you don't know me, but there's a student on your campus getting harassed, can I go talk to him? The school should tell me no as well. And so trying to find a way is, how do we work with schools and law enforcement and how they can communicate? And there's a few ways. ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children, is brilliant at this. You know, it varies by region, but for example, I just met with a group from San Jose, and they do these amazing free parent programs and have an incredible amount of resources. They know how to write warrants and subpoenas to tech companies to get the information you need to either A, get content removed or help you investigate. Another way about it is just, as a school, how do you respond? So in this case, the school found out about the shooting threat at about 11 o'clock at night. They spent most of the night, the admin team, working on their response. They all came to school at 5 a.m. the next day to have their response ready. At 7 a.m., they sent it out. They communicated with lawyers, communications, everybody. At this point, it exploded. So at within 15 minutes of that post going up, throughout the course of the day, almost 800 parents went online and basically blasted the school. You don't care about our safety. You waited too long to tell us. How come you couldn't do more? And of those 800, only one parent went on there and said, hey, if the school knew about it and told us this morning, that mean your kid knew about it last night. Why didn't you ask them what's going on and how come they didn't tell you about it? And that's where the finger pointing and other stuff comes in. So I think the more, either as part of your AUP, back to school events, other stuff, having sort of this collaborative approach to social media of like, hey, if something happens, here are ways that you can tell us. Here are things that you can share with us. Here are things that we're going to do. Hopefully understanding, and this is the hard part, is you just can't share stuff, right? And where we've seen schools get paralyzed is they don't know how to respond, one. Number two, if they do know how to respond, it either has to go through lawyers or communication department, and that takes time. And with social media particularly, it goes so quickly. The sooner you can get something out that's official and accurate, the better. And so what we've tried to do a lot of that is, within our admin course, is have templates for different letters, whether it's a social media incident, on gaming, whatever it is, just to give you some direction and know what to say. So you don't have to create that from scratch, looking at specific language that you can use, as well as sample policies. How do we communicate on this stuff and what's sort of allowed? So for example, if a video of a fight is posted to a private page, what do you do? It's a bullying situation, happens on Snapchat and disappears. How do you collect that evidence? False rumors spread about a student. Maybe it's nude images being shared. There's sort of a lot of little things in terms of just having this conversation. We even had one with a third grader, right? Kids are smart. It had to do with Google Classroom, and the login was usually the student ID number and the password is the birthday. And kids are smart. They can look at an ID and get their number, and they all know their birthdays because they're proud of them. They want to celebrate them. And who doesn't want to bring cupcakes in third grade? It's amazing. And so the kid figured that out. She logged out of her account, logged into her friend's account, proceeded to send death threats to herself. Like, I hate you. I hate your family. I'm going to beat you up. Like, you're so terrible. Then logged out of the friend's account, logged back into her account and responded, and then proceeded to tell the teacher, oh, this person's threatening me. And this is a 9-year-old. IT kind of froze. I mean, nothing against IT, but most of their job is, how do I keep this stuff up and running? They're not trying to investigate. Admin wasn't sure what to do because it's like, well, we think it's her, but we can't prove it. And it was a couple months before the parents finally coming in, and the parent of the individual who did it, when they found out it was the daughter, said, like, I just want to know, because if this is happening, we need to fix this behavior now. So I think the more you can have policy in place and ways to investigate and ways to share and communicate, a lot of the stuff is sort of easy to track down. But I think the more we can train students, how do you respond when this happens to you, and telling the truth and how we treat people, particularly in elementary and middle school, when for the most part, they still listen, and we can model and guide that behavior, the better it's going to come out in the end. So we'll take a quick break here. I think I saw some questions. We're going to try and jump in there if that's okay. And let's see, show active. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's not. Sorry, guys, it's having trouble showing the questions right now. We'll come back to those. I apologize on that. I'll get in there here. There it is. I'll go to the chat here. Great idea. Love this. Awesome slide. Thank you for that. Yeah, and if you guys have any questions, I'll look in there. Feel free to type them in there. Positive comments, love that. So thank you guys, I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and dive back in. So this is one, sorry about that. I got a screen blocking here. So this is a slide right here I want to share about a student, just to give you some perspective when it comes to sexting or that type of behavior. So this is a young lady, middle school student, who actually met someone through a group text. And it was about 20 kids in this group text, which is pretty common. And the kid's like, hey, we think you're great. Can I talk to you? And she said, yes. And as they start talking, he proceeds to ask her, and you see it there, is, how far have you gone with the guy? And she's initially not sure what to say, and says, well, that's between me and my exes, leave me alone. And he doesn't proceed to ask once, he proceeds to ask 7 times, how far have you been with the guy? And this is what we see in instances of sexting. And you can see it on the bottom of the screen in the larger part of the slide. Hey, I don't think it's very respectful that when guys ask girls that, he says, okay, but you should tell me and I won't say anything or like judge you, ha ha. And we share this with students, they all say the same thing. It's like, hey, when someone says that, what do? Oh, they judge you, right? And what I think we try to highlight on this, it's not just someone said, hey, tell me this inappropriate thing that I want to know, and the person says no and they stop. What we see is it happens again and again and again, and they may try to badger them, they'll try to make them feel bad, make them feel guilty. Like it's a very sort of, you salesman approach. where how do I get you and manipulate you to do the thing that I want to do? And a lot of times kids will give in and be like, hey, here's this picture, just leave me alone. And then once they get it, it's like, hey, this is great. Send me more. I'll share this with your family. Send me more. I'll share this with friends. Send me more. I'm going to tell X, Y, and Z. And then that's when kids freak out and they don't want to tell their parents because they're going to get in trouble. Like, oh, if I tell mom and dad, they're going to take my phone away. And then all this trouble is going to happen. I don't even know this photo exists. So I'm just going to keep doing it. And that's where bad things start to happen. I think the more you can talk to kids about how they would respond to this and what could they say. So for example, we surveyed some students and a lot of them said, hey, I just think it's inappropriate. Classic go-to is, oh, my mom checks my phone, I can't do that. Or one situation was actually a sixth grader got this text. Is a principal friend of ours and his daughter in sixth grade got a text like, hey, send me a picture of you in your bra. And so she actually took her school photo and put it in her mom's bra and took that picture. That was kind of clever. We had kids, when I was still teaching, one of our kids, they got a text that says, show me the booty. And her response was to take a picture of a baboon and send that. And so she found that online and sent it up with a giant big old red butt. So I think empowering kids on how they can respond and feeling confident enough that they don't have to do that. Here's the interesting thing about sexting that we're seeing is it's almost this whole behavior culture, right? And particularly the whole aggravated comment, like send me more, I'll do this, versus being consensual. And what we've seen with kids, particularly females, is, oh, if I send this picture, I don't have to do this other stuff. If I send this photo, this guy won't make me do these things. And there's a really interesting dynamic that's evolved there. What we tell kids versus don't do it is to think about why they would do it, to value the relationship with that person. Is this person making you send this photo because you want to or because they want you to? When you send this photo, do you trust this person to be respectful with it? Or do you think they're going to do something else? If you break up, where does that photo go? Do you know that that's going to be the case? So when kids think in those terms and we have those conversations and how to respond and what's appropriate in a relationship, and this comes back to basic dating etiquette, which is a whole nother conversation. It really gets them thinking in terms like, okay, maybe I really like this person. I want them to like me more. The other part of it is what to do. We've seen situations where kids just send a photo to someone completely unsolicited. What happens when that photo shows up on your phone? A lot of kids freak out. They don't want their parents to know. They don't want adults to know. I know talking to the cyberbullying student, others who work with NCMEC and groups that specialize in this, their advice is don't share, right? Just delete the photo, don't tell anybody, ask the person not to send anymore, because that's the whole nother part of it. We've seen a lot of these cases where kids end up sharing. We really don't know how people are going to respond. You want to be mindful of the fact that you have an image of a nude minor, even if it's of yourself. You're a minor, you have a photo of yourself on your phone. Depending on law enforcement's reaction to that, there still could be something based upon state laws on there. The other thing I would advocate on in here, I talk a lot to admin and police about, is not to save any of these photos or files on your device or on your phone. Like if kids share screenshots, do not text it, do not email it, do not tweet it, immediately get law enforcement involved, because you do not want a nude image of a minor on your device. It's just something to stay away from a liability standpoint. We've seen stuff where law enforcement gets something and said, hey, we got this photo, we know it's the student, and then they text it or email it to the administrator, can you investigate it? And next thing you know, you've just transmitted a nude image of a minor. So just being mindful of that, of how you process that information in the workflow of investigating stuff. I just want to be aware of it. Other stuff you can do, like kids look at random text messages from people they don't know. So talking about how do you respond to it? Hey, who is this? I think you have the wrong number. We never met before. Just look at a text like, hey, what's up? And they'll write back like, I don't have your number. Who is this? They're like, oh, that's cool. Who is this? And basically they're trying to kind of like catfish, but get information out of that student about their phone number, their birth date, or other stuff. So teaching kids to be a little bit wary, how to be wary and ask those questions so you don't get someone really just trying to fish information out of them and then use that to manipulate them later. Suicidal comments. We've seen this, right? Reaching out to people. Almost every social media platform has a reporting tool, particularly in an emergency. If someone is suicidal, to immediately get them help. It could be the Texas Christ Line, Suicide Prevention Helpline. In our case, the incidents that I mentioned, the kids saw something on Snapchat or Instagram or whatever it was, showed a parent, and they intervened directly. The biggest thing is to listen, call someone nearby to physically check on them, having comments, but making sure that they're reaching out. It's hard enough being a teenager, let alone a teenager in these awkward situations. We know that suicide is the #2 cause of death between 10 and 24-year-olds. So I think the more we can do to be aware of the mental health side of things, that if they see this, how could they respond to it? I think the better off that we can all be in making sure that this stuff doesn't happen. And then threatening comments. These are big ones, right? So if it's an admin or teacher, if it's directed at the school, directed at another student, letting kids know. I could tell you as an admin, the thing that always cracked me up in investigating things like this when you get the kid in your office and you're asking about why would you post that, they always kind of break down. They're like, oh, I just thought it would be funny. And, my friends and I thought it was a joke. And it's like, well, obviously no one thinks it's funny because you're here. So I think being able to train kids, about how to speak up. This is a digital first responder piece, using, in this case, it's the technical term is counter speech, but they're like, hey, I don't think this is funny. Sending the person a message saying, hey, did you really want to say that? Are you okay? Or are you just mad? You may want to think about taking that down. I've had stuff where I see students, one of my seniors posted a photo with their stepdad or mom had taken it holding a giant bottle of gin. And I saw it on Twitter and I just sent her a DM like, hey, I know you just applied to a lot of colleges. Is this a photo you want up on Twitter? And she wrote back, she said, thanks, I'm going to take it down. I kind of had that feeling, but my mom thought it was really funny and said I should post it. So it's everything's kind of over the map, but it's our willingness to speak up and just kind of give people a heads up versus judging it. For kids, a great conversation is, hey, if your friend had food in your teeth, would you tell them? If the toilet paper stuck to their shoe, would you give them a heads up? Maybe it's not a really good friend because you want to mess with that friend, but in most cases, you'd be like, hey, you have something right here. You may want to take care of that. And that's just part of being human. And then this is another one we've seen in the past few years. It's certainly hanging around, but go kill yourself, or it might show up abbreviated KYS. And so I think the more we can talk to kids about, rather than go kill yourself, how would you respond to that? It's too far, it's inappropriate. And not only, kids feeling comfortable enough to speak out in public, but even sending a DM. And most importantly, reaching out to the victim, the person who's being targeted. Hey, I saw this comment, are you okay? I know it's inappropriate. Do you need anything? Can I help you with anything? Those are huge. And we'll kind of end a couple stories. I want to share some positive examples and we'll see if there's any questions. But this incident was around a promposal. And so the kid was going to walk out in front of 500 students. He was going to ask his date to prom. And at the last second, he flipped the sign over. On the back of the sign was a bunch of pictures she had sent her boyfriend. He said, just kidding, and broke up with her in front of 500 students. Kids were recording this because it was going to be amazing, like most promposals are. When he broke up with her, you could see people jumping around, running around. It was like a really crazy episode of Jerry Springer. And one of my students, when he started to see this after about a day, was getting really frustrated. He's like, wait, why did you make our drama, your drama, our drama? And he couldn't understand it because this is all kids were talking about. This happened at lunch in the cafeteria for a day and a half. This is all kids talk about. How did she cheat on him? What did she do? She's a horrible person. And most kids, when I share the story, they all start clapping like, oh yeah, she got what she deserved. When they started to ask the kid why he did it, he couldn't really have an answer. He didn't say where or how it happened. He just said she cheated. He couldn't add any detail. And in the video, the kids were starting to feel bad for the girl because it kept getting shared and talking about it, and she wasn't even coming to school. So one of the students said, look, I'm just tired of this drama, and what do I say? So we talked about how I could respond. And so you can see in this picture here, the tweet is unavailable. And it's unavailable because what started with 30 students commenting about, hey, take this down, this is inappropriate, turned into about 300. And example after example here of people making mistakes, not minding your own business, not being part of the drama. Again and again and again, no matter the extremes, no one deserves to be publicly humiliated and shamed. Spread love, not hate. You can see our hashtag on there, which is kind of like a bat signal, right? Letting people know like this is something positive, take a look at this. It was incredible to see that really consistently across the board over the last few years, just drama burnout. Kids are tired of the drama. We as adults talk about harassment and bullying and sexting and anxiety and depression and everything else. Kids are really tired of the drama, and that's what's wearing them out. But they don't know how to respond. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to take a step back. And this is way bigger than talks about digital detox. It's not about putting your phone away for a week. Part of the reason kids will not go to adults is because when they go to them and say, I'm having this problem on Twitter, the advice they get is turn it off, delete it, block the person. And that does not help them solve the problem because the issue is still there. So I think the more we do about how do you respond to this, how do you solve this problem as adults, we may not be as like tech savvy or tech connected as kids. However, our life experience is invaluable. We know about friendships and relationships and how to respond to that and how to respond to those situations. I think we need to find that value and see, okay, how would you respond to this? What are things that you could say? What could you do? How do you reach out? And really giving them that direction on how to manage that tech. Like it's here, it's in their life, it's part of what they do. So completely separating from that is not going to be the solution that they're looking for. So a few things finishing up here. We talk a lot about digital first responders. So helping kids identify problems at their school, how to make them better, identifying the people who will help, how they can help, what are things and how they can respond to it. We also have a whole digital restorative justice piece that's in part of the admin course. So when a kid does make a mistake on social media, and they're in school suspension or something, there's a project they can work on to hopefully understand on what they did that was bad and how they can make that better. And this is a big thing, is who are the people who can help, identifying their people and their sphere who can help them out if something happens online. Want to share some positive examples really quick. We have Humans Lawera. This had a school in Southern California that had to do a social media incident where they just wanted to celebrate the positive. It was started by 2 high school students, and one was a photographer, one was a writer. They would go and interview 2 students every day. They'd take a picture, they'd go home, they'd write up the narrative, they'd edit the picture, come back the next day, show it to the student. Hey, here's what we wrote. Here's the picture we took. You good with it? Student would say yes. What I love is the narrative. Like, this girl talks about losing her father at right before the start of her sophomore year. Now she's about to graduate, and her dad's goal for her was really how just not only graduate high school, but to go to college. And she talks about, now that I'm going to graduate, how proud she's going to feel, even though he's not there. Like, she's feeling it's this goal. It hasn't been easy, but she's going to do it. And you can see, you know, when you click on the 108 likes, you can see the amount of kids who just love it and they love sharing it because it's real, because it's human, and because it's authentic. And I've talked to kids about the more real you can be in spreading positivity and connecting with others and being your true self, you're sharing that true story, the more engagement you're going to get and the better things you're going to feel and the better you're going to feel surrounding yourself with that. This is Adam. Adam, we met as a junior. He started Smile Cards at his high school. It is now a nonprofit. He's in about 300 schools across the US. And he just started spreading Smile Cards. It started up as a joke, turned into giving out over 2,000 cards at his own school. And we've since had Adam at Google and Facebook and other places. And really, it's about making kids smile. He has cards that you can write on, cards that you can just print. If you just Google Smile Cards, or, you know, we're happy to connect you as well. And schools are using these to kind of just pass smiles along at school and just hopefully improve people's day. Positive Twitter thread. So see Bridge City High School. They started this whole thing. They're out of Texas. And just spreading positivity online, giving shout outs to staff, to students, to other people. We have another one, hashtag Warrior Kindness High School. They actually went on the all call at 9 a.m. With much hesitation from the principal, but they went on and said, hey, for the next X amount of time, we're going to be tweeting Warrior Kindness. They ended up getting over 1,000 tweets of positivity, shouting out students and teachers on their campus. They had 3 bad actors, which they immediately identified and brought into the office and talked about the intent of the activity. But again, over 1,000 tweets of positivity, celebrating their school, their campus, and their community. It was pretty amazing. And they're seeing stuff, whether it's Instagram, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on social media, just sharing positive content, encouraging kids on how to share positive content. And we'll kind of finish up on this one here. So Digital for Good is our event. And you may not be able to hear it if you do, but this is our social media event, celebrating students. So we had close to 200 students at Facebook, Instagram, our winners. We're actually, nominations are open through this Sunday. So if you know a student using Digital for Good, you can nominate them on our website. We have 10 of them will select. This year we're going to be in New York. Last year we were at Facebook, Instagram, and Silicon Valley, and we match every winner up with a mentor on how to grow and scale their idea. We then give them a Digital for Good. It's their chance to talk. It's completely student-led, but we have to invite the students up. They share their idea, their mission, and specifically we have them share how they did it. We really want, a big belief behind this is kids inspiring kids. We want young people to inspire more young people on not only doing good, but how they did that good and hopefully create something similar in their community. We've had winners from Canada. We've had winners from Sweden, all over the US, Kentucky, New York, Maryland, California, Oregon, you name it. And all of their projects have been everything from a student who really liked robotics and created and built a robotic arm for a war vet who lost his arm in Iraq to throw and catch a softball, to students who work with homeless, to another student like Christina Mazzi created Project Woke, or Women of Color, because she wanted to change how women of color are portrayed through social media. And so our project was, well, let's create something, let's get some women of color together and share those inspiring stories. Every single one of them is about spreading positivity online and how we make an impact. With that, as we wrap up, the biggest thing is if you like these resources, this information, just really want to invite you to join our community. Our biggest thing that I can help is we want to be a resource. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We're all about really making the internet better together. We know it takes all of us. It takes students, it takes schools, it takes companies. We're on the Trust and Safety Board at Twitter. We have relationships with all the major social media companies, TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat, you name it. And we're really trying to work to guide, how do we guide policy? How do we look at human behavior? how do we work with schools, and just across the board of really making the internet a better place and creating these better experiences, you know, whether it be it in gaming, social media, you name it, because it's really about improving how all of us are doing and what we're experiencing, how we're relating to that, how we investigate it, how we and set up our policy, everything that we're doing across the board. So looking to make those positive impacts as much as we can. So with that, we'll see if we got any more questions. So we have real life scenarios. Is there space for educators and adults to easily access them? Yes, happy to share those. We have quite a few on our blog posts. So if you liked a lot of these stories, examples, happy to share more. Hit me up. We have quite a few shared on our website as well. So if you want to look in there, and we'll kind of put these out there sort of as case studies to look at. I think that's kind of a fun part of teaching. When I started my admin work, there's a ton of training around case studies, and it just seems to be fun. We have that. Let's see. I've seen research that kids are more compelled by the term drama than bullying. Is that replacement helpful, or does that conflate the issue? So I think for kids, you want to hit them where they're at. And so it may start with drama, and then we can classify it as bullying. Or if you help them make the connection, think in terms of like the SAT. That's kind of a good, one-to-one. You know, like they may see it as drama, but you know, bullying, I feel like we did such a good job at teaching it that you can be at school right now and a kid can look at another kid and be like, you're dumb. And they put their hand up, I'm being bullied. You know, bullying, we need to be careful of, because it has to be like a systemic, consistent, documented use on multiple occasions of the student being targeted. So I think from a legal standpoint, we want to be careful, but I think talking to kids, they're going to relate to drama a lot more. Speak a lot about building positive culture through social media positively. This sounds hard to do right away. What would you say is the first step for a school who's never done something like this before? You know, if you're going to get this started, highly encourage you, you know, bring together the stakeholders, you know, particularly students. I think they get overlooked a lot, not valuing their voice, but they will be a good source of what's really happening. And then bringing your staff together. I always say pick one thing, and it may be you decide to start a social media account. It may be you decide to do a kindness week. Maybe it's a kindness month. I think anytime, whether you use I Can Help or a similar program, it has to be more than an assembly. It has to be more than a one-off event. So in our case, a lot of our support materials is not that you do a kindness week, but could we do a kindness day 1 month every year? Or if you do spirit days, dress up days, rallies, back to school events, that you take that concept that you want to embed and you revisit it consistently throughout the school year. Initially, like when I started teaching it, if you really want to change school culture, I talked about it's a 4-year period, because you can start to change the freshmen and sophomores, and you can graduate your problems, so to speak. I was talking to a principal recently, and that principal basically said, look, if you really care about an issue, pick the one you're willing to dive in on, and you can change your culture in a year. And I really believe that if it's social media, if it's climate in general, if it's just how we treat each other, across the board, if your staff and students buy in, you can legitimately see that change in a year. I can tell you for myself, my dream scenario came my last year in the classroom, where students came in. We had a homecoming week. We had powder puff football on a Monday night, and the kids went home around 9. The next morning, my students came to my room and said, hey, Ms. Schultz, did you see that confession page on Twitter? And I'm like, no, what is it? And they told me, and I typed it in, couldn't find it. I handed the phone to my student. They typed it in and showed me. It said page cannot be found. And the page couldn't be found because enough students had seen it and reported it the night before that it got taken down. So by the time they came to school on Tuesday, no fighting, no drama, no issues. They knew what to do. They knew what to say, situation handled, and it was done. And that's where we're trying to get is how do we empower our kids to take action? How do we empower our parents to take action, our staff to take action? And so much of that is just modeling, guiding, practicing, and really supporting that positive content and celebrating the heck of that. I learned a long time ago, school culture, you are what you celebrate. So looking at those different avenues and narratives on how to cover all the sports, all the clubs, and everybody else. So with that, yeah, bringing students to stakeholders is brilliant. I think the more you can do that, the better. So with that, there we go. Any other questions? Yeah, you are what you celebrate. Yep. I think there's some good stuff on there. If you have additional questions, please check out our community. We'll be sharing that as well as anyone who signed up. If you're watching this recording, highly encourage you, if you have questions, to again, go in and add those to the community. We'll try to add those pieces in there. And then last thing, we have this digital healthy habits challenge going on. So encourage you to jump in there. I'm just looking at how you manage your screen time, talking to your students on how they manage their screen time, and sort of setting limits and managing that, and just taking sort of some healthy habits to look at how we engage with technology. I think the more we can have those conversations ourselves, I think the better things are going to go. So want to thank you all for your time. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate being part of it, either the recording or the live part. And any questions, we are a resource. So again, please hit us up, and we'd love to help you. Thanks for your day.